Hello there, people of the internet. So, revolvers. I know a lot of people out there hold revolvers near and dear to their heart, and they just think that they are the absolute best thing since sliced bread. And then there's other people out there who wouldn't touch them with a 20-foot stick. So, revolvers, are they any good for modern defensive purposes? Of course, back during the time period where revolvers were very mainstream, they were like the primary firearm for using for defensive purposes, so we know it is definitely possible. However, in modern day, well, your modern semi-automatic handgun can hold, 20 plus rounds of 9mm ammunition. What is the point of going out with a 5-shot J-frame revolver to be able to keep yourself safe? Well, there's definitely some pros with revolvers, definitely some cons, but definitely some pros with revolvers. And whenever I'm talking about revolvers, well, let me tell you guys the story that made me come to this conclusion. I currently don't have any modern style revolvers. I had to get rid of some of them. I know I had several of them at one point, but I got rid of some of them back whenever I had my stroke. I had some medical bills to pay off, and it was a huge mess, and I had to get rid of some things that I did not like I did not want to get rid of. But I got rid of them, and now I'm back in the market to where, like, hey, it'd be great to have a 357 and a 44 Magnum, and one nickeled and one blued, and maybe like a nice 22 long rifle revolver, and just etc., etc., etc. Insert choice of deciding on a revolver here. Oh, it'd be really cool to have a Schofield. That would be a sweet revolver to have. But I'm just interested in old school style revolvers. But modern style revolvers for modern day. Well, how do I start this story? My mother lives in the next town over, and she lives in a part of town that isn't necessarily the best. It's far from bad. It's not a ghetto or anything like that, but it's not necessarily the best, so I actually leave one of my own personal semi-automatic handguns there at her house that she can use for defensive purposes. I mean, I don't have it out in the open. It's in a locked box and in the closet. So it's not like it's just kind of hanging on the wall or anything like that. But I have my handgun there that she can use for defensive purposes, and I've showed her how to use it, and it's a semi-automatic 9mm. And with how she is oriented and her lack of understanding of firearms, especially in a stressful situation like, somebody's kicking in her door or something like that, I don't feel adequate enough for her to be able to use that semi-automatic platform. Just with that handgun and that location and the people that we have there, and just with my own personal preferences of storing the handgun over there, we store it without a round in the chamber. Now, if you're going to carry one for concealed carry, then yeah, put it around in the chamber, but this is just stored as a home defense firearm inside of a closet, so we store it without a round in the chamber, just in case it falls off the shelf and we don't want the hammer to get knocked and something go off. I mean, there's a million and one reasons why storing without a round in the chamber is a good idea. However, we store it without a round in the chamber, and if something happens, it's also a single action only external hammer fired system. But if something happens, I don't trust my mother to be able to fundamentally use this handgun effectively against whatever it is that is going on. I've already taught her how to use it, already told her how to use it, but whenever stress comes into play, like knowledge and whatnot, remembering things go absolutely out the window. So I really don't, like if somebody's running at her, I don't trust her to be able to remember to rack that slide, because we keep a loaded mag, empty chamber handgun. I don't trust her to be able to rack that slide, make sure the hammer is cocked back properly. I don't trust her to be able to fire, and maybe she's one of those people that once she fires, she doesn't understand it's semi-automatic, so she has to run the slide again. Maybe she'll end up wasting some ammunition. I mean, insert choice of complication here that comes with a semi-automatic from somebody. Thank you, Kevin, from somebody who doesn't necessarily know how semi-automatics work. Man, Kevin is screaming up a storm. Kevin's my peacock. I got 4 of them. They're all named Kevin. They make great alarms. The only issue is they scream whenever I'm out here as well. But I can negate all of that nonsense by just giving her a revolver. I'm like, hey, here's a double action, single action revolver. If something happens, all you have to do is pull the trigger. We would have all of the chambers loaded, and I would show her how the transfer bar works. If you guys don't know what a transfer bar is, like, it is the bar that raises up whenever you pull the trigger to actually hit the firing pin whenever the hammer falls. So that right there would be the safety feature. If something drops or is jostled or something like that, the hammer won't go forward and hit the firing pin, so we don't have to worry about an unwanted detonation. So I think that there would definitely be a good way to go. And I'll show her, hey, you don't have to rack any slides. You don't have to worry about any magazines. This is already loaded. I'm probably going to get her like an 8-shot 38 special or something, so there's not that much recoil, and she can be able to hold herself onto target. It'll be double action, so I'll tell her all you have to do is pull that trigger. If you want more accurate shots, pull the hammer back, and if she has the time and ability to remember that, then she can pull the hammer back for more accurate shots. But if she doesn't, then hey, just pull that trigger and get the threat out of the household, right? So I'm thinking that's probably going to be the way to go. Just because of her lack of knowledge of firearms, I don't necessarily trust her to be able to effectively run a semi-automatic in a stressful situation. I would much rather her just be able to grab the gun and pull the trigger and not have to worry about magazines or anything like that. And the beauty about it is with the handgun I have over there, I got one magazine. That should be enough, but I got one magazine. And normally with people working with semi-automatic platforms, they don't necessarily know how to properly reload a magazine, especially not in a timely manner. Well, if she's running that 38 and, you know, it starts going click, she knows she's out of ammunition, opening that thing up and just putting more rounds directly inside of the cylinder is so stupid simple, literally nobody could mess that up. And then you just kind of close that thing and start pulling the trigger again. I'll teach her that you don't have to fill it all the way. If something starts coming at you, it doesn't matter if you have 3 rounds or 4 rounds or 5 rounds loaded into that cylinder. Close that and pull the trigger again until it goes bang, and you will eventually start sending lead again. And that is definitely a very good idea. Now, whenever it comes to revolvers for defensive purposes, there's probably one of the biggest perks, the fact that it's simple. Revolvers do jam. I have had revolvers jam. I actually have one that is currently jammed that I do not use because, well, it's jammed, and I have not gotten around to unjamming it yet. Whenever revolvers jam, unjamming them is a bitch and a half. Very, very difficult. But semi-automatics, whenever they jam way more often, but they are much easier to unjam. So, I think that we can all agree that revolvers are still very much a practical choice for modern day defense if you decide to go with a revolver for defense. For insert your choice of reason here. I just gave my reason as to why I would pick a revolver for self-defense for this particular person. But I think that we can also all agree that although old school style revolvers could still be used, having a modern style revolver would absolutely be the best option. If you get yourself a modern style defensive revolver where the cylinder swings out, or maybe it's a top break revolver or something like that, to where you can use something like a speed loader or something like that to put more rounds in, and then you close up the revolver, close up the cylinder, and go back to town, you can reload that thing very, very quickly. Even if you are there reloading 1 round at a time from a cylinder that swings out, it is still going to be much faster than dealing with a revolver where it has like an ejection system and a side loading gate to where you have to eject each individual round 1 at a time and then load each individual round 1 at a time. Those revolvers, yeah, you absolutely could still use them for defensive purposes, but reloading them in a defensive situation, especially if your attacker has, you know, more modern equipment, definitely not the ideal way to go. I would definitely want some sort of system to where I can open up the cylinder, pour all of the rounds out at once, and then put like a speed loader in there, close the system, and now you have another 6-shot in just a couple of seconds. So you get the pros of the simplicity of the revolver, and you also get some fast reload times. So a modern style revolver for defensive purposes, that would be the best way to go, as opposed to an old school like Colt single action army design. Speaking of old school design, this would also be a very antiquated design. I'm actually out here with my 1851, I think that's what this one is, the 1851 44 cal black powder made by Pieta. And I got just some round balls inside of this thing. It's behind 25 grains of black powder. And I want to just go ahead and send some of these round ball down at a box I have down there. I want to see how accurate this thing is. But I think that we can all agree that black powder percussion cap revolvers, cap and ball revolvers, probably not the most ideal style of revolver for modern defensive purposes. Yeah, it absolutely could be used. As a matter of fact, if you're in a situation where you have some legal issues and you can't own a modern firearm, these right here, legally speaking, do not actually classify as firearms. So unless you're in a state or a place that classifies otherwise and says, hey, you are in legal issues, you cannot even own something like this, then there are some situations. Of course, look up your local laws. I'm not a lawyer, but there are some situations where people who cannot own other firearms could own something like this, and this could very much be a practical defensive firearm if you find yourself needing that particular means of defense. Now, normally this right here would be loaded with more like 35 grains of black powder. I tend to download things or I tend to unload things whenever I'm here on the gun range because I don't need a ridiculous amount of power going down range. But from a properly loaded 44 cal Pieta like this, if you have yourself the 7-inch barrel or 7 1/4 or 7 1/2 or whatever the normal full length barrel is. Your 44 cal projectile is going to be traveling at around 1,000 to 1,200 feet per second or so, and that is absolutely enough to be able to stop a threat from doing what it's doing. The issue with cap and ball revolvers is reloading the damn thing, because if you need to reload your cap and ball revolver and you're in a situation where you need more ammo because, hey, the threat is still there, the odds of you reloading this thing in time are very, very minimal, and if that is the case, then your life is no longer in immediate danger. As a matter of fact, whenever I was loading this thing, I have all of my black powder reloading equipment over on my picnic table that I just kind of sat there and I loaded 6 cylinders. It took me about 8 minutes to load all of these and then cap them and then use the ramrod and just all of this stuff. Definitely not an ideal situation for using these for defensive purposes. So I'm just going to go ahead and send a couple of rounds down at that box, and I want to see if I actually hit the box. All right. Yeah, I can see that I hit the box. Looks like it hit a little high, but I did hit it. Oh, failure to fire, and that's fine. That's pretty typical with these style of revolvers. There's another one. And yeah, I'm hitting my box probably a foot high, but this thing seems accurate. We're currently at about 40 yards, so the accuracy of this is probably not going to be all that great. Not with round ball. And then we got little percussion caps falling down onto my finger as I'm trying to shoot this thing. Alright, I had 2 rounds that did not go off. I'm going to try running them again, and we will see if we hit our target. There's that one. And some minor cap getting stuck in our cylinder, very common with these revolvers as well. I'm going to send my last round here. Alright, well, they all fired, and I hit my box. Looks like at the 40 yards or so that we're at, we got probably about a foot spread, and it looks like they're hitting a little bit to the right. That's about to be expected with round ball at this distance. Anyway, folks, I had 2 rounds that didn't go off on the first hit, and that's just something that happens with these systems. If I had very properly, appropriately fitted caps and nipples and whatnot, this right here is just the stock nipples that came with this thing, it would increase reliability. And I'm just using number 10 caps on this thing, and the caps, you gotta kind of just squeeze them on and hope for the best. Definitely not the most reliable system. There are upgrades that I could make for this system to make it more reliable, but I'm not going to use this for defensive purposes. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below. Link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'm going to go reload this thing and see if I can get a little bit better grouping. I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.